It's okay if your silicon is fragmented. We can work with that anyway.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me as always are Gollix and Pettyfan. And let us get to the weekly dissertations. Gollix, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, the other day, my family we've needed this year to have our roof redone, and they did that
they get it at a slope?
mostly yesterday.
Fine.
Thankfully, the plan was to get it all done in one day, and they almost did. The downside is that this means that they started at 7 a.m. directly above my room.
Oh, God.
So while I relocated to another part of the house to try to continue sleeping, I did not get a whole lot of sleep that night. And I am feeling some of that now, in addition to having a headache from mostly weather stuff.
Pressure headache, yes.
Yeah, it's just, it happens. Nothing too bad. I've taken something for it, so hopefully it'll clear up a bit. That's really all that's been super interesting this past week. Video game wise, I've been playing Splatoon 3, and also going back to Tears of the Kingdom a bit to try to get some of the monster medals. Although I got somewhat distracted by trying to build a super Lionel killing weapon but unfortunately, I looked at all of the locations in the underground and the depths, and I could not find a single Royal Guards Claymore. So I'll have to try again at some point. And also, it's Golden Week, so I don't have that many games that do that, but I guess in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there's an event where some of the Pokemon that have gold shinies are in mass outbreaks with a higher chance of being shiny, so
Fine.
I might try and grab a shiny Rellor or something. But I'm not going to be playing right now because I have a headache.
Also, you have the week.
That's all I got. How about you, Patty?
Oh, God, where do I even begin? Monday, my dad finally started his new job.
Patty, you are not audible in Discord, although I can kind of hear you on the stream.
All right, hold on. Is this better? I accidentally unmuted the wrong thing to Discord.
Yes.
All right. Apologies with that. So yeah, there isn't too much that happened this week. My dad finally started his new job, so he is out of our hair for the day now, which is, it's weird having the house to my sister and I having the house to ourselves during the day. It literally hasn't been that since the parents went back to college over a decade ago. So it's nice not having to walk around like feeling like you're walking on eggshells because one of the parents are asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So that is cool. Possibly either next week or the week after, I need to get back with them about this, but the pool should be put together. So that should be fun. And in kind of unfortunate news, the fix I tried on the air conditioner did not work. it looks like there might just be some like leaves and various detritus in the air conditioner itself. So this weekend, my dad and I are going to try and pull it out of the cabinet and see if we can clean it out and if that fixes it. Because I really don't want to spend $1,000 on another air conditioner. Because they get expensive.
Hmm.
As far as gaming goes, not really a whole lot on my end. I still have been playing some stuff on Game Pass mostly, just because the living room we have the portable air conditioner set up, and that's where the Xbox is also, so I can just play games on Game Pass. I've been messing around with Another Crab's Treasure, which is it's an interesting game. I'll give it that. And I believe I just had it download Have a Nice Death as something else for me to give a look at because the trailer looked fun and it's part of Game Pass. So what do I have to lose? And I guess for kind of off, well, at least post-season shenanigans, Ogre should have his new computer put together next week. So there possibly could be some co-op game streams to flex that new computer. So
Finally, getting into Helldivers too, I guess.
I don't know if he can get into Helldivers, but I do have a invite code for Game Pass. We were
Hmm.
thinking about possibly Evil West because it has
Not-
cowboys and trains. So
I know of the game.
mhm,
I'm meaning to play that. That's on my queue. Can't wait to play. I love the developers behind that. Big fan.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did enjoy Shadow Warrior. So
Oh wait, no, I thought you meant Weird West.
no,
You said
Evil
Evil
West.
West.
This is from
Okay,
the Shadow Warrior devs.
okay. I was talking about Weird West. Sorry. Yes.
It's the Western styled, almost God of
The
War like,
oh,
the new
okay.
God of War.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's it from me.
Okay. I guess it's my go. Let's see. In terms of gaming, I've been playing the stuff for the show for the week. And we'll have the insights on Sunday. Played a bit of Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 3. And I had much time to play that, but apparently that's supposed to be the bad one, but just from what I played so far, I like it better than the other two. But maybe that's because they've de-emphasized the platforming so far. It's like it's a hit the kart races.
I think I have Kai, because I vaguely remember seeing it in a Humble Bundle.
I mean, there's 4 tie games at this point. Like, don't know how long I'll stick with it, but like, the previous game I played for about an hour, and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's see. Planning on finally getting the labs done here in the next couple of days. That's been a long time coming. And really, that's all I wish to talk about this week. So, usually, this is the point where we shift to the interview and do our traditional things, but we have to break format a bit here because this game is special. Rather, it has some special functionality that needs to be explained.
Alrighty, the game is up. I guess while I'm getting this set up, if you want to introduce the dev and he can kind of walk us through what's
Right.
going on here.
Okay. Yes. So joining us this week is Gregory MacMartin of Interdimensional Games.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
Awesome to be here.
Right. So I suppose we'll start things. This game is consortium or consortium.
Yep. Yeah. Both work. Consortium. They're both. It's just different ways to say the same word. So, but yeah. I call it consortium. I typically call it consortium. Yeah.
Anyway, so why don't you walk us through the voice system?
Yeah, well, soon you just got to make your way through this initial connection sequence thing here. So the stick behind our game is that you have to imagine that in our world we have a satellite up in orbit that is capable of shunting your consciousness into an alternate future reality, alternate parallel universe in our future.
I've seen how this anime ends. Wait, what?
Yeah, no, literally. So we take that literally. So right now you're kind of connecting to the brain of this host in this future parallel reality. So you're in the year, you're about to connect to the year 2042. So think of it like quantum leap. You're about to basically leap inside to somebody. You have no idea who or what or where you are. And that's all. That's it. Really, that's the best way to prime it. Those symbols mean something, by the way. It can be decoded. Those are all coded messages. And the latest build has that screen replaced completely with new stuff. They're still putting in polish for the game's close to finish. Really, really close, but not quite. So, yeah. We just, like, literally today put new stuff in that screen. Yeah.
Alrighty. Oh, I did accidentally activate it.
Yep.
So, yeah, basically with voice on, which you have it on, you can basically just speak out loud any of those lines that are about to show up. And the game will recognize you said it, and
Who
you'll
is
get
there?
a response. But we can't hear the sound of the game. Is that's a purpose? We're not meant to hear the sound of the game.
I do have it muted.
Yeah, you might have to boost the volume here to fully show.
Not sure. Yeah, maybe for the stream. I'm not sure if there's a great way to have us be able to hear it without having it be able to hear all of us.
Is there a way to turn on closed captions, at least?
Yes, there is. Yeah, there is. Yes, absolutely. Options. Yeah. So there, accessibility, or I think it is.
Yeah, accessibility,
yeah,
language.
Yeah, subtitles right there. There's the checkbox right there for subtitles.
Does
I think you got you just pause the game when there's a big flash happening.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. Sometimes you just click it on. That should be good. You should be good.
Accidentally turned it off. What is your name? Right, and where are we? Okay, let's get to work. That is kind of an interesting system. So I'm just going to mess with this while you conduct the interview. I'm probably just going to have myself muted.
Sure. Okay.
Muted to Discord. The chat, I'll probably have myself turned down, and I will try and have some of the audio on, but it's going to be very low.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
So this is going to be on the pause screen for a little bit, and I might pop in and say something when I have it all set up.
Sure.
I guess, Adam, you can get started with the interview if you want.
Yeah. All right, since that's all out of the way. Right, so now we can resume the traditional questioning. That is, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Let's see. Personal level, when my parents bought an Atari 2600 home, and I was 6 years old, and I started playing Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, and I burnt my thumb out because I played it for so many hours straight. I just learned the patterns and totally aced that game, and I was like completely addicted to video games ever since. So that's about 1984, something like that, somewhere in there, 83, 84. So that's personally, and then professionally, it was coming out of high school, so I was in grade 12 in Ottawa, Canada, and buddies of mine were programmers, and had gotten together and started making a game engine. They had played Wolfenstein and got blown away, got inspired, started building an early 3D game engine, and they had sort of got this technology. They had this editor up and running, and they wanted to make a game. And I sort of got involved in an early stage where they just had this sort of basic editor. And I remember putting the software into my computer, where I lived in my family's basement at the time, and I had my room down there and I had my computer, and I remember installing that editor and booting it up and like messing around with it, going, oh my god! I realized like that was it. I discovered my passion in life right there and then, and basically worked with them, and we shipped my very first video game. It was called Radix Beyond the Void. It was like a shooter somewhere in between Descent and Doom, kind of Doom-like technology, but with sloped walls and ceilings and lots of explosions and just like a shooter. It was it was a fun, amazing project. Learned so much. It was actually a shareware title. It was actually published by Epic. It was called Epic Mega Games at the time. Now they're just known as Epic Games. But yeah, we got published by them. So I got a fair amount of attention in that regard. It wasn't exactly a hit though, but I definitely knew what I wanted to do with my life and career at that point, for sure. So that was like 1994 when I started working on Radix with the guys. Yeah, and that's it. I haven't looked back since. Well, career, various games. I'm not big on. I could list my resume if you want, but I don't know if you guys want that.
I mean, it's probably best to fast forward a bit to how you got to your current position at Interdimensional Games.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they basically just as I started indie essentially with a bunch of guys, and did indie a couple things, and then got into AAA for a while and worked on some big games, and then basically I have my eyes set on making my own game and going it alone. So 2006, I incorporated Interdimensional Games Inc. And I mean, it was just me to start with, and I started coming up with what I wanted to do, what engine I wanted to use, what kind of game I wanted to make, how I wanted it to feel, and I went with the Source engine because at that time you could make Half-Life mods with the Hammer editor, and that was what I kind of wanted. So you can see here, this game, this plane you're on with this crew, this virtual crew. It's like a simulated, big airplane with a virtual crew walking around, doing their jobs, and you can interact with them. I started building this plane in 2007. So in with the Hammer editor, I have screenshots and stuff to prove it, so to speak, taken from that time. It was just me, and then I got my brother excited, and he came on board, and then I got another person excited. It slowly built up, and then we had a huge package of materials that I assembled. We assembled, this gigantic stack of lore books and backstory, business plans, and our whole vision for what we wanted to make and do. And then we were able to get up here in Canada. There's something called the Canada Media Fund, sort of a government-sponsored thing where you can sort of apply to get a bunch of money to make experimental media. And they just started doing video games in 2010, so we applied for a $500K amount for investment to make what we wanted to make, and it worked if we got it, and that effectively kickstarted the whole thing, where we got really serious and started production of the original Consortium in 2011 and shipped the original Source Engine Consortium. We now just call Consortium 2014 in 2014, January 2014. So when that technically shipped.
Now, you were telling us in the pre-show that you had started work on Consortium in 2007.
Correct. That's correct. That's what I said. I started building the plane myself. So I the actual design of the plane, and I built the whole thing with brushes and Hammer, right? So the layout of this plane, a lot of it is exactly as it was in 2007 still. A lot of the layout didn't change a lot from what I actually laid down in 2007. But this environment right now that Petty Fan's in. I mean, because and then once I had the plane down, I knew I wanted to make a game that was set in a small environment. That was explicitly about a small environment where there's a bunch of people, but they were all stuck in that environment in a natural way. So an airplane was a perfect way to do that, because everybody's stuck in a tube and no one can leave. So I thought that was a really fascinating idea, a framework to base a game around. Was to focus on the micro, right? The games are all so obsessed with huge open worlds and just ungodly amounts of content spread over gigantic amounts of space and lots of grinding and that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, but what about the micro? There's a lot of to be explored in the micro that games very rarely, explore, because reasons, I guess. It's because it's unknown, right? But that's always driven me. My entire career, I've been driven trying to find different ways to tell stories with video games. Like pretty much every game I worked on, I tried to find a way to imbue storytelling elements into it in some way. So really, when I formed IDGI 2006, I knew I wanted to move forward to make a video game company that, one, advanced the art form of like first-person storytelling. So like really taking the first person, like Half-Life, full on, 100% first person, holds no bars. You're there. You're in control. The game never yanks control away from you. There's never cutscenes. There's never that kind of crap. A true immersive sim. But one that is also based in a world that isn't death and destruction and then zombies and just death everywhere. Because I was personally sick of that stuff. I just felt like there was a lot more the games could do. I wanted to make a game where you could immerse yourself into a world that was actually aspirational and positive, and has ideas in there that, if applied, to the real world, maybe we could have a better world ourselves. Quite literally, we're hoping to capture maybe the new wave of kids, especially the young kids that are all playing games that are more experimental and stuff than what is typical. Like Lethal Company, for instance, right, is a classic example of what the kids are playing these days, right? Fascinated by the ability for young minds to be influenced and maybe be inspired even by this game or games in general, because it's such a powerful medium. And they're usually just used to exploit people and get money out of their pockets, right? They can be used for so much more than that, than just commercial purposes.
I mean, that might depend on where you're looking. Like,
true.
In RB, we come across all sorts of weird and interesting titles. Like,
fair. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely exist. It's just a matter of like having to be known by anybody that they exist, right?
That is sometimes the issue.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can break through. Like Dear Esther comes to mind, or Amnesia. Any number of.
Those are pretty old. Those are pretty older titles, though. Those kind of game like that now. There's bajillions of games like those now. Walking simulators are everywhere, right? Like Dear Esther invented the walking simulator. You could argue, right, in terms of taking a first-person camera in an environment and say, okay, environmental storytelling, go, right, and that's it, basically. Yeah. Voiceover, right. Clever voiceover to go along with what the environment is you're in, things like that. But I mean, don't. I agree with you. I mean, the thing is, but those games were also released a long time ago too. Like, I recently saw a graph of releases on Steam that shows the releases year per year, how many releases were done over a year per year basis. And it's like an exponential upward curve. Like, I'm not joking. Like, ridiculously. Like, when as Steam started to open its floodgates, and then Unreal started to open its tool set, you just had a gargantuan more number of games being produced in the entire world.
We were there when the floodgates started opening.
Yeah, we all were.
So
right? Totally.
I'd say the other tipping point was Unity more than Unreal, because the amount of devs that's come through our program that have used Unity versus Unreal is quite notable. Like,
okay.
It's like
fair enough. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like Unreal is the more powerful engine.
Yes. It's a better engine.
It's harder to use from everything that has been told to us.
Yeah, it's a different paradigm.
Kerfuffle that happened.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It's still taught in schools.
Yes.
Apologies, chat. I had to turn myself out. I forgot I was down low and chat could barely hear me.
I mean, this is a pretty unique setup we got this week. So,
I think I did some decent demoing of how that works, so I'm probably just going to have it the
There's a
voice
whole,
thing off.
there is a whole nother thing. Just make sure that you go to the virtual trainer. There's a bunch of content in there that's fun to have in the background to play.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And you can also, you want to just advance the story along. You get you want to play a little bit the actual story itself. You just need to get the CMC. You get the CMC. I'm not watching closely. Did you get the CMC from K15 in Mission Operations?
Not yet. I was just kind of meandering around and talking to crewmates.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I will turn the voice thing off for right now, just so we can, converse.
Yep. Yep.
Alrighty.
Right.
Anyway, back to the interview.
Epic is definitely, that's right. Epic, I mean, Unreal is definitely more of a AAA-ish engine, which is why I think we've gravitated towards it, because I an old school game dev, so I understand the paradigms going and play. Whereas Unity, I guess, is more suited to be. It's easier to pick up. It's more bare bones. Everything's sort of there. And yeah, I mean, we have one game coming out using Unity, so but it may be probably be our only one though, ever, likely.
Mm. And speaking of engines, I believe you mentioned that the original version of Consortium was built in the source engine.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
what made that particular tool set appealing?
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic question. The reason why is because I really wanted to make sure there was a lot of choreography. I wanted to simulate this crew on this plane with you inside of it and have it be seamless. So the only tool set I could have available to me at that time was using Face Poser, which is the core tool as part of. It was called Face Poser at the time. It's been morphed into now. I think it's called something different now, but in Source 2. But and the Source engine at the time is called Face Poser, and that's basically the tool you brought in, where you brought characters in to bring them to life, right? To it was power the choreography, which meant what characters look at other characters, what's their facial expression, and blinking and smiling and phoneming, so saying the lines, having the lines match what's being said, all that sort of stuff. I knew that I had that at my disposal. That was the main reason, to be perfectly honest. We went with Source. That was the main. And also, I mean, it's not like the engines were totally available back then, right? In order to get Unreal, you had to put in $50K or something, right? At minimum, to get access to Unreal back then. So, it's not like I had like a huge smorgasbord like you do these days. We can sit back and go, all these engines, which one do I want to choose? But yeah, that's, and also because I also, again, recognize that I understood how to work with it too. So I had familiarity with the tool set. I had worked with a tool like Hammer previously, so it wasn't hard to grok and, bang out what I wanted to bang out. Basically, it was just making a prototype for this, to be able to then go and pitch potential team members, to get them excited about the idea and try to build a team. Yeah.
And how long did it take you to do that? Assemble the proper team.
Ooh, that's a whole kit and caboodle right there. Because when a company is really new, it has a young identity as well. So it's hard to necessarily understand who does not have the how to put it. Like a little way to put it is that basically our game company is not a typical game company. When I first started it, I wasn't setting out to make a typical game company that is like an employees gets to huge levels and employs all these people, and I'm a big employer, and I provide employment to people to come make video games for me. But I never ever intended to do that. I set up to make a specific thing. It was a creative endeavor, not a business endeavor, right? Fundamentally, Interdimensional has always been a creative endeavor, not a business endeavor. I've had to make it into a business endeavor to be able to realize the creative part of it, but it's creative first. So that meant that I was looking for people especially early on, looking for people that were very passionate about what I was passionate about, trying to find people that were aligned with my values and what I wanted to make, and sort of see if I described to them told them what I wanted to make, if I saw excitement in their eyes, right? If I saw excitement in their eyes, I'd be like, okay, maybe I should keep talking. Maybe this person might be interested because they're just interested in what we're trying to do. So it started, and we had a team assembled kind of in 2011, but half of them just weren't. The chemistry wasn't correct. The energy, the mentality wasn't correct. That's how to put it. There's just so we had to find other people and or do without and then I have to say that the current incarnation of our company includes people that have been with us since those days. So it's basically around 2011 was when people that are currently now founders and the core people of our company, they joined around, or except for one of them, which is a little bit earlier. But my point is that it takes a long time. It's really hard to find people that gel well together and have the same belief in terms of how they want to spend their time, what they want to do, what they want to produce, what they want to have their name on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How much they need to get paid for their life, right? To have a living. All those things. There's so many factors involved, right? So, in given the fact that it was a creative endeavor, it really meant that we how we've structured our company is that we sort of like we staff up and people come in and kick a bunch of ass and then they get credit on what we make. But it's not. But then they move on to other projects potentially, right? Or we bring people in and we give you. We've done a couple times. We've had young programmers and young developers coming out of school that desperately need experience, right? And they're just desperate, but yet, at the same time, I see a lot of passion and I see a lot of potential for them to become great developers. So I said that there's potentially a fit there, right? Where they're perfectly happy to work with us, given that we don't have all the resources in the world because we're a small indie game company, but yet they really want to just contribute to help making what we actually want to make, which is something that very few people are doing. Like we do very risky things, very, very different risky things. We're not really hit chaser type developers. So that means that we have to be careful. We have to be very persistent, first of all, and dog-headed and stubborn to move forward with it, to achieve what we want to achieve. But yeah, we've really had some amazing. I'm really proud of some people that have come on board for a period of time. We sort of had an experience together. We did a bunch of awesome work together, and then a couple people gone off to great careers. People have gone to Blackbird and are working on Homeworld 3 right now. Others going to other places, and so I'm proud of that. How people have gotten careers coming after working with us. But it's a long time. So I would say, like, what to answer your question, 15 years. It depends upon the goals, right? Every company, every organization, including you guys, has different credos and different ways of organizing yourselves and different reasons for existing. And ours has always been to, like, we want to try to make change in the industry. We want to show an example for what other game companies can be doing, especially in VR, to like massively enrich what the type of entertainment experiences we can have. And rather than games, the commercial treadmill the games are on right now it leads down to you're getting higher fidelity, higher production value versions of the same thing, and often simplified a little bit. Now, that being said, though, the bajillions of awesome indie games and all the surge of intense creativity of the past couple of years, notwithstanding, because I don't know all the games that exist. No one does anymore. There's just too many, right? Like, how does anybody keep track? You'd have to, like, every single day look at every game released to be able to try to find every single potential gem, right? I remember back in the day, 20 years ago, you could almost list all the games that were released on, top of your head, almost all the ones you cared about. I remember doing that, trying to stay on top of it. Played all the games that came out like crazy. Right? I was a voracious gamer in the 90s, right? All I did was play games or make games. So I just played everything and finished everything, right? Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, it would depend on the platform, really. Like, the popular ones would get a lot of games, and, like the PC, there's all sorts of stuff that's been out there, because it's an open platform.
Yeah. Get massive diversity. Like, you have tons of crap, but tons of amazing things, tons of weird things, tons of everything, basically. Yeah, see stuff. Tons
of shovelware.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how was the reception to the original version of Consortium?
So that's an interesting question to answer. We definitely shipped the original version in January too early, and we made a blunder. Being new to the whole thing, when we shipped, you can actually go back and you can find the Steam post it's actually on our blog. If you go to idgi1.ca, we have our blog. You can go back in time to right when we were on release, and you can see our Steam post is still live. You can go check it out. See how we reacted to what we did. We first of all, the early access system of Steam had only just started. Right. This is early 2014, right? So early access had only just been around for like not even a year at that point, right? So we were, I was unsure about whether to use that. I knew, quite frankly, we didn't have a proper visibility on how how much more testing our game needed, how much more time it needed in the oven, right? So we did the classic unfortunate mistake of pressing that button too early and not, skipping early access, just going straight to telling everybody it's a totally finished game. And it was still very broken. No question. It's broken pretty badly. Including, actually it's kind of tragic because we released on on Wednesday, and the GameSpot reviewer posted his review on Friday, and he mentioned a major game-breaking bug that we had already patched. That day, we had patched away, and yet his article is talking about this game-breaking bug. So, that's, and they wouldn't change it, right? They wouldn't change it and say it's been fixed. I mean, yeah. I think actually maybe they made an addendum or something afterwards. But anyway, my point is that we just moved too early, and then we did a couple months later. We spent a whole bunch of time. We tried to fix all the bugs and do some major changes to it, and we did patch it and have a big final patch, and we released on GOG at the time as well. And we started the player reception was overwhelmingly positive. Even the buggy version, we had massive number of people saying the first great game released in 2014, and oh my god, this game's amazing, and all this stuff that flooded, even with the crappy broken version of the game. But then as the year went on, we had some really interesting press. We had Rock Paper Shotgun really saying some pretty amazing things. They dropped an article at the end of that year, the very end of 2014, like December 30th, right before the clock ticked to 2015. It was like a retrospective, specifically talking about Consortium, about the impact, so to speak, that it could have, and what it could mean for the sequel. In terms of the sequel, could be something really special because what this is setting, what this is establishing. Just the things they said. A lot of the things they said, the press and reviews, which there were lots, was like that's what we set out to do. Like what they were describing that the game does is like, okay, it's successful. We made that. We actually did a game that does that. And that was what we set out to do, right? So it was great. I just think that we definitely screwed the pooch from a commercial perspective because of our initial flubbed launch by just pushing that button too early. So this time we've been really, really cautious, right? With the game, this version of the game, this Unreal 427 build of all three SKUs, in fact. So Consortium VR Quest, Meta Quest, Consortium VR Steam, and just regular the flat screen Consortium. You're looking at it now. It's been in the oven in early access, in testing, in nonstop fixing and improving and whatnot for about 13 months now. So we're right at the end. We're just at the cusp of we've just gotten down to the bottom of the barrel. We've gone through all the issues and bugs. We polished everything we set out to polish when we decided to do this remaster, and yeah, we're almost done. And yeah, I just think we look back. We look back at all the critical feedback, like literally everything bad that was said, like the combat was clunky and the graphics were terrible and all this sort of stuff. And we tried to address as much of it as we could within our means, of course. But we tried to address everything. Certainly, the combat systems and whatnot are all really quite complicated, but yet they're polished. Everything's given a level of polish that we're pretty happy with, right? Again, given our means, right? Within reasonable expectations.
Indeed. That is rather unfortunate.
What's rather unfortunate?
The reception to the original Consortium. But...
Well, what part of what I said was unfortunate? Because you mean the fact that we released early? You mean the bug reception part of it? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Especially because you mentioned the GameSpot reviewer wouldn't go back and change that, which I think is something that would be very different these days, just because so many games are releasing in the states that they are releasing in.
Yeah, you're totally right. Totally. Yeah, it's a whole different world now. I know. I almost don't recognize it. It's I've been a game developer all this time, but I feel like I'm in an alien planet a little bit in terms of releasing this game, because it's old school with its mentality a little bit. It's so I just don't know. Yeah, it's tough to understand how to release games in this climate, for the reasons you just said. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's multiple factors going there, and speaking of such things, now you mentioned this, I think, in the pre-show, but it hasn't really come up in the interview yet. And that is the VR version.
Yes.
And you've stated that this is really the way to go with this version of Consortium.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
So I'm wondering, how difficult was it to bring Consortium to VR? If it was difficult.
Oh yeah. It was very complicated, very difficult. I mean, we had ourselves the Source Engine build, which was the Portal 2 version of the Source Engine, which is now quite old, and 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 on top of that, we actually replaced the Portal 2 renderer with a custom, not even finished renderer. So that's the build that we shipped in that's Consortium 2014, and so the renderer didn't properly support AMD cards, and it was slow and weird.
God,
and,
that was a thing with those. Holy crap! I totally forgot
Memories
about
unlocked.
Yeah, because I had an AMD card in my laptop at the time, and was like, "Why isn't this working? Why can't I play Portal?" And I'm like, "Oh, that sucks."
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. It was we had to basically. It was a genius of our CTO, my friend Ryan Sheffer. It's really his genius that allowed this project to exist, because he worked out in his head, because he knew the Source Engine so well as a coder, like as an engineer. He knew the Source Engine so well, and he now knew the Unreal Engine so well. He could see in his head a way to take all of the code that we inputted into Hammer and all the systems that govern how the game functions and works, and literally duplicate, like bring it all over, port it directly into the Unreal Engine, into the editor, so that we basically have the entire logic environment of the game's narrative and all of the logic all running inside of the Unreal Engine, but yet still using the same core logic that existed in Hammer. If you guys follow me, like we actually we duplicated how Hammer handles game logic inside of the Unreal Engine, so that our core, all the logic, all the story logic that we painstakingly scripted together to form this interactive story was working exactly as we had it in Unreal Engine. Then we could just take it further and polish, and fix as far as we could, until we feel like we've gone far enough, and that we did what set out to accomplish. So hard work. And VR in particular is whole set of massive challenges that don't exist in flat screen, right? Just in terms of positioning the player, like understanding the difference between the player's camera and the player's actual space in the world, and what parts what parts you collide with, and it's actually really complicated stuff, like beyond my head.
How to make the player know they're about to run into a wall.
Well, yeah, right. Actually, that's basic stuff. Exactly. How do we give the boundaries to VR players to tell them that they're going into a bad spot, kind of thing, right? Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, and make sure the player doesn't trip over certain pets, because that would be bad.
Yeah. So it's just unbelievable how much stuff came out of the woodwork. We had basics up and running. Okay, this is pretty cool. And then as we just kept going, there's this one nonstop issue after another we had to deal with. So yeah, it's painstaking. But now that it works, it just works. So that we've kind of enabled our whole system to just work in VR, just straight up, right? Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's complicated. It's hard work for sure. But the reason why, yes, it is definitely better. This game is best if you're going for full immersion. If you want to like completely immerse yourself into this virtual universe, that VR is simply the way to go, because all your attention's focused on the story and the world and the characters that you're inside of. You're inside this world. You're a free agent inside a world. Otherwise, with scripted agents, but you're free inside of it, and the story constantly pings you and constantly relies upon your input to move forward. Right? Especially because of the fact that if you're in VR, the voice thing you're playing with here, you're yelling at your screen or whatever. But in VR, it doesn't feel like you're yelling at a screen. It feels like you're talking to a person in front of you, because the person feels like it's standing in front of you. So the voice is just natural. So basically, the reason why we say VR is number one is because we think we've unlocked an awesome way forward for a whole new kind of VR experience that I think lots of people really want. Like, this is a whole side thing, but Meta does these yearly they query all their users and the big questionnaires and whatnot, and they've gathered data to show like the various people's interest in VR and the world and stuff, right? And it turns out the biggest group of people they've called story seekers is like 25 million Americans supposedly are people that they think VR has potential, but they don't think it's quite there yet, and they really want games to like story worlds to immerse themselves into, and storytelling games, right, to do that. And but yet there's so few, and the game, all VR storytelling games right now, they handle dialogue very clunkily. Either there's like a disembodied voice floating around you, you're supposed to imagine that's you, or there's like things coming up in your arm with words. You gotta like click the arm, and that's supposed to mean that you're saying something or something to someone in front of you. Or you hear a disembodied voice that's supposed to be you. All games are stuck at that. They're stuck at that precipice. None of them have gone beyond that. Our game here in this VR literally smashes through that wall. So, okay, here's a way forward. Here's how you can make voice be an actual verb for players moving forward, especially in VR. But splash screens too. I mean, this game's already doing it. I'm sure you guys have played Phasmophobia, right? Guaranteed, you guys have played Phasmo, right? Yeah, I'm a huge Phasmo fan. And you can talk to the ghost, right? There's an open mic. Are you here? Are you close? You know, and you can go talk to the Ouija board, and it's super compelling. And it works well in that game because it's ghost and it's supernatural. You're just talking to no one. You get a voice. That's cool because that's what you expect. But to me, it's like it goes way beyond that. And our game this game here. It demonstrates, like I said, especially in VR, but in this one too, like how you can just sort of. You don't need to press a keyboard button to instigate the avatar in the world you're playing to say a line that you don't have to have that separation anymore. We're not proving that you can have it so the player is inside a dynamic story environment, literally, and that dynamic story environment happens around you, and you're able to just make changes and do things and sort of guide the story however you want to guide it based on your actions and decisions, right? And not have that separation anymore. Like that's what's really excites me personally is all the possible experiences that can be made now that go so far beyond our definition of game. It's not funny, right? Seriously, like we're talking about like full on reality simulators. Like imagine in VR being inside of a like if you take our stuff and then like add up, make it $100 million budget and a huge production team, like a Hollywood 3D production team. Right now, it's possible to make like a virtual film that you are inside of, and you can say lines. You're inside that film. There's people all around you, and you can even have like famous actors that are fully modeled out and have their voices actually their voices by themselves. Obviously, you could have people acting in films that you're inside of, and you're talking to them. So you could talk to your favorite actor directly. Look them in the eye and say lines to them, and have them say lines back to you. So you're acting with them, if you will, right?
Do you know about the Les Stroud VR experience? Les
Stroud, I think
Survivor Man.
It's Survivor Man. Yeah, no. Oh yeah, Survivor Man. That's what you just had that recently. No, I'm aware of its existence, but not anything more than that.
There was actually a developer on our show earlier this season who was making a VR experience involving him, and they actually had cuts of him in the game.
Nice. Cool. Yeah. How did they do it? What was their technique? Do you remember?
They had a split technique. There were some actually live action film segments, and then there was like some of a model of him that was voiced, that had some of his voice work with it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. There you go. That's an example right there. Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. And it was also apparently really complicated to implement in VR.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Have you guys played Seventh Guest VR? I guess of course not. What am I saying? Guest not VR player. Sorry.
We have not played. Like we have had the developer on the program.
Oh, cool.
Like,
it's a very small world here.
Yeah. Isn't it, eh?
Especially if you're talking about VR, like
right.
You know, I think that came up with one of the VR developers that we talked to recently, and that is, you know, like most VR experiences are really small. Like,
I believe it was the same developer of the Les Stroud one.
Cream. And
Cream, that's
like
the name.
You know, the high watermark of VR development is still Half-Life Alyx, and that was 4 years ago at this point.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Like, mainly because it's a chicken and the egg scenario. You know, it's like, you know, the user base of VR just isn't big enough to support, you know, bigger developments, and, you know, not enough people are getting the experiences to justify buying the VR. So it's just that, you know, a cycle of niche here.
And not only that, we have people like me who get very motion sickness when it comes to VR stuff. And like,
well, it's also really expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive, and there are people with motion sickness problems who I don't really feel like popping a Dramamine whenever I want to play a video game, personally. You know.
Yeah, well, the very, very, very most modern VR. I bet you might not get motion sickness because the frame rate's so good, everything's so crystal clear that you're not peering through like a screen anymore. The screen's gone, like it's all super
but
crystal clear.
like one of the first experiences I had, I was literally throwing up on the ground. It
Holy
messed me
crap!
up so
that
bad.
sucks.
So.
Oh man, that sucks. What? Do you remember the hardware you were using?
I think it was Oculus, like actually Oculus, not you know.
Was it Oculus Rift? Was it Rift? Do you remember?
I believe it was one of the Rifts. Like it was like 1 or 2, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Some of those early sets certainly. It depends upon some of the early software was really, really bad. So that's actually the problem. Is likely you loaded the wrong piece of software for sure.
Yeah, I think like the part of the thing was the demo was like a roller coaster demo. And my stomach did not like that. I don't know if you remember the Rift roller coaster demo.
I remember a bunch of them.
My stomach was like, no, get this off of me now. And I was throwing up the back of a Best Buy. That was not a fun time.
I'm sure the technology has improved a lot, but when I get bad headaches, they're really bad, and they do sneak up on me. So I don't want to risk being fine while I have it on and then taking it off, and then I can't walk for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Understood completely. Yeah.
Anyway, shifting gears a bit, because you've mentioned how narrative and story heavy this game is, but I don't think we've really talked about the story itself that much yet. So, what is the narrative of Consortium? Who are you? What are you doing?
Okay, so you jump into the head of Consortium Bishop 6. You're basically part of this futuristic peacekeeping force that is tasked with protecting the Earth's environment and maintaining global peace. You're in a future where most of the world's militaries, not all, but most of them, have just dismantled, and this organization called the Consortium sort of has a hegemony, sort of controls all the security of the entire Earth and also the moon base and space stations in orbit and such. And so you're on board one of the command centers that's cruising along above near Bulgaria, and you're on this exact day. You wake up and you're in the crew. Essentially, the first part is figuring that out. Like that's part of what the game is to begin with, is working it out. Like poking into the information console, the buttons at the top, the info console, where you can read about every single person here has backstories, and people's backstories have backstories. Things they say have articles. Basically every single thing in the game relates to the story of the world in some way. There's nothing arbitrary. It's just like it's just a video. Yeah, we did fix that overlapping stuff in the latest. But it's about really sort of allowing yourself to soak up a virtual world that's really quite complete. Even though it's a small environment, there's so much depth that spreads out beyond that if you sort of go beyond the surface level. But the main point is that you're on this plane and you do what you want, but as soon as he goes in the cockpit, the story will advance to the next level. Essentially, it's about giving you as much freedom as possible. But then, as you progress, as you do things will happen, and then you have to react to that. So at a high level, I see that it's one of those things where it's best to be explored without being told what it's about, right? Because that's one of those type of think of it like almost like a bottle episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. But not with the Enterprise, but instead on board like a proto, like an early version of what a society that's headed towards the Star Trek universe might look like, right? So it's sort of like it's a stepping stone idea where rather than having ships warping around totally unrealistically, instead we've conceived of this base and it's all extremely realistic. It's all hard sci-fi, right? There's not like random fantasy stuff. There's actually quite a bit of thought put into all the tech and almost Star Trek level tech in terms of our lore. And I can show you the books behind every single piece of gear that you can get access to, and it all connects. It's all consistent. It all ties with the balancing of the game. So the actual balance of the game and the combat reflects what you read about the gear and things like that. I mean, it's really, 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 really almost like if you were to like how Baldur's Gate 3, for instance, right? It sticks very closely to the Dungeons and Dragons rule set, right? Because it had to, because it was like that's what it was demonstrating. It's like here's a video game version of the latest rule set of D&D. and they had to stick to it, but yeah, there's a connection there, but anyways, yeah. My point is that you basically are tossed into this thing, but there's a couple things that are odd, is that you have the ability to basically say lines that aren't necessarily in the context of the world. You can speak as yourself. We have the ability for you to say lines instead of just you talking to people in that world. You can tell people that they're video game characters in a world, they're not real, or you can say they are real. But your point is you can sort of speak through the fourth wall a little bit. That's number one. And there appears to be people in that world that maybe think that they know that you're an otherworlder, So there's that part of it. But another part of it is just the general intrigue of what happens, and we're about to see here. After he finishes the conversation with Wade, something will happen, and that is sort of one of the inciting moments of the game that sets up a murder mystery. I'll just say, and then other things happen. There's actually you're being, when you first woke up, there's airplanes flying around. You're being escorted by a couple old American F-35s. F-35s have been sold onto the market and now being flown by mercenaries. And they are they're escorting you through Bulgaria. And there's this hint that there was previous blood between what happened, that this crew has had a previous really bad encounter with these groups of mercenaries. So there's all this tension and worry that these groups of mercenaries might attack. And so the bishop's being woken up and saying, hey, just in case, get ready, get your gear on, get ready to see if something happens. Something does happen. And then as you continue to make choices and go on, the game continues to split a couple times, and it becomes more and more customized to you, effectively, every player. There's quite a few splits. As a matter of fact, I could show you the narrative web, and it's basically about 10 times more complicated than the narrative web behind the Telltale's season 1, the Walking Dead. Do you remember the season 1 Walking Dead Telltale? I'm sure you guys have all played that. It was all super popular, right?
Yeah.
So the actual narrative web behind those games are extremely simple, right? Like if you look at the actual choices and the branching and all the different things that can happen, there's not a heck of a lot, right? Certain people die or they don't die, but there's not a lot of complexity. Whereas ours is like about 10 times X complexity in terms of like the intricacy of what you can do and what you didn't do, or what you could do, or what you didn't say, or what you did say.
I definitely remember reading that there are a lot of character will remember this or whatever comments where no, actually that does not have any actual long-term effect on the thing.
Exactly.
It's just to make you feel the impact of it.
Yep.
Or
They
just for
literally-
the game's built-in karma system and nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. And it just simply said, yeah, they like you or they don't like you or they'll remember that. That's all bullcrap. That makes you think they remember that, but they never do. You're right. That's almost all is total crap. That's almost none of that has any actual effect on the game at all. But
Don't
yet
get
it's
me
still
started on Fable 3, so
felt-
help me God.
Oh.
It's still emotionally effective.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah, it makes you think that this can remember me. Yeah, for sure. In this case, though, a lot of these people do remember what you do or say, and they're aware of what you do in the world too. The CMC that could communicate. So the part of the layer of this game is called the CMC. So you picked it up. It's consortium. It's called the Consortium Mind Communicator. It's effectively like the neural link. What Musk wants the neural link to be, right? Where basically you can form thoughts and you can project your thoughts to anybody else on the CMC network and have them hear those thoughts. And you could also listen in on somebody else's and even see what they're seeing if you want them through the CMC, and so then comment and talk to them seamlessly. So the CMC kind of allows someone to have like a camera feed to anybody else that has a CMC and be able to instantly communicate with them and have to communicate back with you through thought, through thinking. So the story of our game constantly uses the CMC in ways where you could basically be having a conversation with the crew over the CMC, but dealing with a bad guy out loud. So you can be talking out loud to the bad guy, but then when you talk to the CMC, he or she can't hear you talking with the CMC, right? So you're having these sort of dual layered conversations, right? Like the best way to put it is there's a philosophy behind this game that's not about making numbers go higher and leveling up things, right? It's not all about that. It's a specific experience at a moment in time where there's so many details taken into account, right? And so much depth going on into all aspects of it that if you let your mind sort of absorb it a bit, it becomes very, very engaging for that period of time. And then you come out of the experience and go, whoa, it's like a ride, right? That was like, wow, that was something. That's what I did. That's what happened, right? Kind of thing. As opposed to, as opposed to what other games do, which is very few games take that approach, right? It's more cinematic, and it's like, this is your story. This is your interactive story that's catered to you. As the more you play, the more the globals are taken into account to determine what happens, right? Basically, right? Something as simple as like deciding to not talk to someone can literally have a huge consequence. You don't see an entire scene. You don't see an entire thing will happen, right? Sometimes you don't even realize when you're making choices how the story is changing literally because of what you said. You're not quite sure until the end. Oh crap, could that have been different? And chances are, if you go back and make a different choice, you may see a whole bunch of different stuff, right? It's just inherent in how, like, I want to play more games like this myself, right? I don't like the way I'm talking about the AAA game industry at large, not indie games particularly, but I find that AAA games have become so bereft of creativity and so more and more down the line, they're just like cookie cutter, like higher production value, same shit, higher production value, same shit, like just repeat, right? It's so frustrating. Whereas I know that those kind of resources could be put behind. I know it's possible now to really make things that are like, that truly blow people's minds wide open. Like it just in terms of personal interactive experiences, like, where you're inside a world and you're having an impact on that world. And because it's single player, the impacts can be quite profound, right? You can cause things to happen that cause massive impact in that world you're in, because it's entirely your story, right? Yeah. I digress a little bit because there's a whole sequel to this. It's already built, and you can fully play it. You can even import games from this into it. That there's a whole other kit and caboodle. We're not really promoting that so much right now, but there is a new version of it coming out that supports importing saves from this one. That's Consortium the Tower, right? That's a direct sequel. That's more of like a Deus Ex like game. It's basically taking all the same mechanics of this one and blowing it wide open to a huge skyscraper, and adding in like a map system and inventory and stuff like that. But it's a direct continuation, narratively speaking, right? So the two games exist side by side.
It doesn't matter. Let them move in. We've got all the evidence we need to figure out exactly.
Right. So I do think it bears mentioning that Consortium isn't just a game. It seems to be at the very least 3 games.
It's actually yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Or at least 3 games that I can see on Steam. We've got the Consortium Remastered /VR that we've been talking about, but there's also Consortium the Tower.
Yes.
And the upcoming Whispers from the Rift.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that's almost done. Whispers is almost done. Part of the if you will, the marketing campaign of this upcoming launch of Consortium VR Remastered is going to be the launch of Whispers from the Rift about a couple of months after. Like literal, and that is a whole other cool kit and caboodle. That is actually an interactive novel, like a classic choose your own adventure book, a huge one with 170, 180 endings or so. But it remembers your choices hardcore. So it's like 100 globals or more, right, of choices. So that the deeper you go into that story, it goes even more than what we were able to pull off of Consortium and Consortium the Tower, because those are 3D productions, so they're obviously way more expensive and harder to produce. Whereas this text-based game is like, it's all text. So we went kind of crazy with it. Or I said my brother went crazy with it. Who's our writer. He's just gotten so good at interactive writing, though, man. It's amazing how when someone spends time writing for interactive media, how they just get better and better and better and better and better and better, because it's such a new field, right? So there's always ways to come up with new, cooler ways to do things. But yeah, Whispers from the Rift is a prequel. So Whispers from the Rift is 2028, and it's about 15 years before the events of Consortium and Consortium the Tower. And so it sets the stage for how things ended up being as they are. It's sort of, yeah. I don't want to ruin. I don't want to spoil it any more than that. But it's pretty cool. And it's we're even considering having it so you can you'll be able to import saves from Whispers as well into the Tower. So if you want to play the Tower truly fully from canon all the way from the beginning, you could play through Whispers, grab your save, hold onto that save, play through the Consortium, and then start the Tower, import your save from Consortium, and then also import Whispers save. And that way, when you're in the Tower, there'll be globals that will be activated based on what you did in Whispers 2 games ago. There'll be changes based on that. And then, of course, all the changes that occur when you transfer universe from this game into the Tower. All the choices and decisions you make in this game get moved into the Tower. Even if you're even able in this game to not even complete the main objective of finding you'll see in a second, finding the traitor. Finding the person responsible for the murder you guys just saw. You can get to the whole narrative and not solve that mystery. It's fine, and then you can import that save into the Tower, and the story will continue you having not found the traitor. Perfectly cool. Or you could find the traitor, and the story will continue from that. Or you can let certain crew members die in this game. If you accidentally let a crew member die, that will be remembered, not only in this game, but in the tower as well. So you import your save with that crew member dead, that person will be remembered as being dead in the next game. Certain characters may mention it and stuff.
That is a very elaborate save system. How did you keep track of it all?
Yes, well, it's evolved. We've been around for so long, and we've just kept evolving our stuff and kept pushing our stuff. Like, to elaborate, the save system that the game here that we have is one where you basically you can spin up a universe, and then everything starts from scratch, and you can go move forward. But then there are save points, saves that are automatically made for you along core story beats. We call them chapter saves, and they automatically get saved. If you pass a chapter save point, they will save at that point. And then you can always go back in time based on that. Or you can save a game whenever you want to, your own save, and you save that however, whenever you want to, but no restrictions, excuse me. Excuse me. Or you could just quit. The game will auto save whenever you go to the main menu. It'll auto save for you in case you forget. And then you come back, you can just resume. But you can also, and this is a kicker. I remember telling this recently to someone that kind of blew their mind. Because we needed this feature for development to address your question. In order to how we kept track of all this stuff is that we were able to. We added a feature to our game called universe branching. So you basically, at any given time, you could branch your universe into another universe. So you could have a whole other universe and call it something different if you want to. But effectively now you've now got two, like a copy universe, if you will, of your previous one. So then you can go off in a different direction if you wanted to, try different things, right? And then just come and then decide to end the game that way, and then come back to the other universe and then try that path. It allows you to easily branch along the story whenever you want to explore whatever you want to, and then you can always come back and try another branch or what have you. So it was, because we know our story so well and how all the interactive elements hold together and how logic works, we were just able to keep track of it all. We have a big chart, and the logic's all fairly well organized. Although if I were to show you the logic in the actual Unreal editor, you guys will probably all belly laugh because of how much crap is in there. It's ridiculous, just how packed it is with stuff, entities, and logic everywhere. But it all has a rhyme and reason. It all connects and makes sense to us, anyways. Again, because we've been doing it for so long. It's our tech. Obviously, Unreal isn't our tech, but the interactive narrative technology is entirely ours. We invented it from the beginning, and we've just been iterating on it ever since. The voice is being the most recent addition, right? Where this now with voice, this is now the game I set out to make basically in 2007. Because I really felt that at that time I didn't think it would ever be possible to have it so that you could actually use their voice, but I really wanted to have it so that, because if you play the original Consortium in 2014, there's obviously no voice. You just have to make a choice to say a choice. But I found we got feedback where people saying, hey, you should consider adding a disembodied voice because that's what all other games are doing, right? So I was like, no, this is the player. The player is the one saying this, not some other person. That was always something that was very adamant about. But I understood that it was kind of hard to get that across, and some people didn't connect with them, right? They weren't able to grok that because it was so unusual. But now with the voice, I think, especially in VR, I think it makes sense because it's just like you're expressing yourself. Here are the different ways the game allows you to express yourself, and you can simply pick one of those. And to go on top of it, you don't have to say the exact line either. You can say part of it, and the game will still recognize it. So you could have added in your own stuff, make it your own flair. The voice
That's
itself.
Good to know.
Yeah, this is some of the stuff that goes down.
At any rate, so how, or rather, what still needs to be done with Consortium Remastered here in order to get it over the finish line?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a heck of a lot. It's getting to the bottom of the barrel of our final polish features we want to add in. So certain, like for instance, the information console, we've just massively improved it beyond what you see here. As I mentioned, the screen at the very beginning when you make up's been so we're basically polishing the very, very beginning, right? And making sure that's right. Otherwise, we're continuing to test it ourselves, knowing how to pound on it, looking for other critical bugs, make sure that are fixed in the meantime. But not a heck of a lot. A lot of the core. We got a whole slew of stuff from one of our biggest fans. A backer of ours that is a really good tester, and he gave us a big list of stuff, and there's some critical issues still in it, so we'll clear those out. So it's just getting to the point where we've covered all the stuff we intended to cover for the remaster, if that makes sense, right? At a certain point, we could just keep working on this forever, but that's not. It just doesn't. It's not going to be any good for having it so that anybody can ever play it, right? So there's a point at which we kind of try to have everything be at a similar level of polish, so that it's consistent at least, right? That's about the best we can do. but again, like it's very new and original, like especially the voice system. There's nothing else like it, and I think there's an implication we're laying down here for what could be possible if other games were to take an approach like this, right? Which is the whole point. That was literally the entire point. That's one of the goals we've had, is to try to create this new genre, create a totally different genre of game experience that isn't about trying to get your attention to be stuck there for 100 hours, consistently powering through and just unlocking tons of content after content after content after content. Just these massive, super expensive things that people power through and they go, oh, okay, I'm done with that, and they never go back to it again, right? But instead, to have more attention put onto the smaller things, like having it so that the game really cares about you and your choices and your little choices and decisions, right? And the game's always watching for things, trying to make it more personal, right? And specifically in VR, as I say, with voice, you can go off into a cabin in the woods by yourself, disconnected from the internet, dive into our world and just start practicing, social stuff. You know what I mean? You can really get into it. Certain people that maybe are more introverted or what have you, right? Can just sort of go crazy and say you can say nasty things to people and be a total asshole, right? You're not the choices we give are very, very wide open. You can insult almost everybody. You can be a real dick, and the game 100% is okay with that. You can go through the whole story that way. It's fine. The game will reflect that in some ways, right? It's as much as possible. This is all about us trying to stay out of the way of the player, and it's about the game trying to stay out of the way of the player and trying to respond to the player as much as possible, respond to the player's actions and decisions as much as possible. And there's Easter eggs and hints, like that word that just came up on top of the screen that actually has a very particular purpose. It's the Easter eggy type thing, right? It's as an example. But yeah, it's finishing up all the last bits and pieces and making sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, so to speak, right? The proverbial.
Right. And I suppose my final question at this point in time is, what are you looking at in terms of pricing?
How much is this game going to cost? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. $16.99 at launch, but there'll be a launch discount off that.
I actually have a question. Is the voice system only supporting English at the moment, and are there any other languages planned? Or
it supports Spanish and yes, French and German. Actually, sorry, right now it's German and Spanish are in there, and French is coming very soon, and actually Russian is too. Just because we got Russian a long time ago. A fan of ours from Russia, long time ago, we worked with him. Actually, we paid him in, and I'm not even joking here, we gave him a big carton full of Canadian maple syrup, because that's what he wanted. Yeah, literally, that's what he wanted. So, okay. And then, plus a bunch of other stuff, t-shirts and, swag and stuff from our IP. And then, yeah, he translated it. So we've got that, and we're just sort of going to patch it up and release that as well. But yeah, those, and then, we'll eye up for going for more afterwards. But yeah, the voice system supports Spanish and German right now. If you want to speak Spanish, you can go to the options and change it to Spanish and see it. Yeah. Yep.
That's kind of nice, because I know, there are people who don't always speak English, or English isn't their first language. So if they can switch it to their native language, that helps the game tremendously.
Indeed, that's our hope, 100%. Yeah.
I think that's it on my questioning.
I think pretty much everything I'd been asking has been asked.
All right. Hi, Gregory. I want to thank you for being in our program here tonight and talking with us at length about the Consortium universe.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Indeed, it was most enlightening. Anyway, so the main game here is Consortium Remastered / Consortium VR. It is coming, or rather, it's available now in early access on Steam, and it's coming Q2 to MetaQuest 3, if I'm remembering correctly.
All MetaQuest 2, 3 Pro, not just 3. But so okay. Yes, MetaQuest, Steam VR, and Steam Flat Screen, all Q2 2024. Very, very soon. Yeah.
And we'll be clocking in at $29.99 USD.
I guess I have to ask the question.
Wait. Actually, what's 29? What you say? $29.99 USD? The Consortium VR.
Because that's the price listed on Steam here.
Right. That's so. Here's the thing: when you buy Consortium VR, you're also getting remastered. This is actually a really key thing I need to convey. So you can just run Consortium VR in flat screen mode. So and if you would, and here's another thing too: if anybody that owns the original Consortium will get remastered for free.
That's nice.
And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of gamers that own the first game. And so actually like 325,000 people own Consortium on Steam. All of them will get this, what you're looking at here, for free, 100%. But my point is that anybody that maybe, is thinking about VR but wants to play Scratch, getting VR will get you both, basically. You can just run it in either mode, effectively. And save games are transferable. This is pretty unusual. Save games are totally transferable between both modes. You could literally be like playing the game on your Steam Deck a little bit, and then go home and like continue in VR, and then go and continue in your PC. All the same game, same universe, right?
Oh, that's cool.
The same games just load. Yeah. Thanks.
And do you have any plans to support the Apple Vision yet, or is this one of those who knows type systems?
Is that even a gaming device at this point?
Somebody's going to ask. We both know this. We've all been an Apple fan at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a pretty fascinating device. If they open it up in some way, and then there's no reason why we couldn't put our game to that. No problem. We're looking at PSVR 2 as well. Probably, not too distant future. It's another example where we're just simply it's almost a recompile, not quite a recompile, but it's not a heck of a lot of work to get it working. Now we have a finished game, right? So that's another. Yeah, getting our because the Steam VR version has a lot of stuff that the MetaQuest doesn't, graphically speaking. So that should run very nicely on the PSVR 2. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, so welcome to the topic of discussion for the week. As mentioned last week, we are going to be talking about the games that defined the Game Boy, more or less. Clearly there's more than just those, a lot more, because, as mentioned last week, the Game Boy was hugely popular for a long time. So, given that...
Penny, is the bottom of your screen okay?
My capture card is glitching out. Stand by.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, as I was saying, this is how you end up with, according to Wikipedia, 1,042 games for the original Game Boy. That is not including Game Boy Color releases, by the way, or Game Boy Color compatible releases. At least I don't think. The point is, the original Game Boy has over 1,000 games. This is not too surprising when you remember how cheap and easy it was to develop for, relatively speaking, and also, it lasting about a decade. And as we were talking about, as far as what software defined the Game Boy, well, at least, when it comes to the biggest names in terms of Game Boy software, there's really, there's three periods. There's the early days, there's the middle period, and then there's the end /Pokemon day.
Yeah, early on, you got a lot of relatively conservative puzzle games and things that, are reasonable to try to get with the extremely limited screen real estate and slow processor, plus a few platformers and stuff in there.
It's interesting that the narrative around early Game Boy games is that they were conservative and all that. I think of it more, they were stabbing in the dark, because a lot of the narrative around the Game Boy is how underpowered it is, especially compared to even contemporaneous / near contemporaneous platforms like Game Gear and the Lynx. But keep in mind, the Game Boy came out first. Like, even the Lynx was a few months later. So that means, what was the actual lineage of handheld gaming to that point? The answer is not much. Not completely destitute either. Like, in fact, a lot of the previous history comes from Nintendo itself, from the Game & Watch library or lineup.
I was going to say, but my very first handheld one is the Nintendo, the one that has the mirror. The handheld one where there's like a mirror showing you the screen. It was Donkey Kong. It was like a 2-screen Donkey Kong. Yeah, I played the crap out of that. I remember that really. As soon as you said the precursor, that came to mind. Yeah.
Yep. And then you had like the actual first handheld video game system in the Microvision, and other things that are closer to that than the Game Boy. Yeah. Like, in real terms, like, the Game Boy does represent a massive leap forward for handheld. It's just, just a short time later, that leap forward would be exponentially leapt forward. It's like, the Game Boy is to the Microvision what the Lynx is to the Game Boy in relative terms. That's how much of a leap we're talking about here in terms of software developments. So the Game Boy occupies this weird space where it is at once, yes, a very underpowered system, very, not impressive graphically, but on the other hand, is a giant leap forward in terms of what could be done with a handheld. Like, specific moments in time are weird like that. So, in keeping that in mind, like, what made a handheld game really hadn't been codified until, a few years, I'd say, into the system. We were talking about this aspect of the Game Boy on Sunday, and that is the dimensionality of the sprites. Because, a lot of early Game Boy games, especially, are marked with not necessarily missized Game Boy sprites, but, Game Boy sprites that are either too big or too small. Now, realistically speaking.
Yeah, it took a while to figure out the amount of screen real estate to use on your characters.
Yeah.
To obtain a result where you can easily identify your character that you're moving around, and they have enough character to their sprite that it's an enjoyable game, but also they don't take up so much of the screen that you can't see what else is going on around you.
Yeah. Right. A good representation of this is the original Super Mario Land. Like, because Super Mario Land really does typify early Game Boy development that wasn't, say, a puzzle game. Or even in some cases, like, when I brought up Quirk, you still had, there are some other puzzle games like this, like Q Billions comes to mind. And just a slew of other early Game Boy puzzle games where everything is so microscopic because, we're trying to emulate the Nintendo Entertainment System, but we're also working with significantly less screen real estate. Like, I'm trying to remember the exact dimensions of the Game Boy screens, like 194 by 112 or something.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's also weird in that it is slightly taller than it is wide.
Right. The ultimate point is, it's small, and they had to figure out how to work within those confines. So, you got the Nintendo approach was the conservative approach, if you will, at least, in the beginning, because, once again, I think it's more an aspect of they were trying to get to grips with the system, because you can see this reflected in its direct sequel, Super Mario Land 2, which typifies some of the problems that had by going too big.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them. Because Super Mario Land 2 has much more well-defined sprites.
Let me see if I can bring up Super Mario Land 2. I fixed the capture card, by the way. That was fun.
I don't think Super Mario Land 1 is on the NSO yet, but Super Mario Land 2 is.
Oh, it's just the screen here, because once I open up a game, it fixes itself.
That's so weird.
That's a weird. Yeah, but see, here's Super Mario Land 2, how it would roughly look on the Game Boy, minus the shitty screen with the no backlight and the shit ton of ghosting.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point, this was one of the platformers once they had gotten a bit more comfortable with it and gotten a good idea of how big they should make things and stuff.
Oh, God, I forgot the slide on this one. Jesus.
Yeah. Well, this is because, both LAN games were designed by a completely different team than who usually handled Mario. I think I've mentioned this before, but the Super Mario Land games were handled by the R&D 1 team, who were not the usual developers of Mario games. That was usually R&D 4/EAD, today EPD. R&D 1 had very funny ideas with how Mario should handle and how enemies should function. Land 1 especially.
Funny is a way you can put that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell by looking at Mario Land 1 that it was not made by the same normal Mario people. Yeah. You got the turtles with the shells that explode instead of being kickable. You got the weird Egyptian themes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not Egyptian. Weird places on Earth. You got like the China area, the Egypt area, the Easter Island area.
China.
Yeah. You got 2 different stages where you are doing a side-scrolling shooter, one underwater and one in the sky, and then sure, have for your final boss, have a random goddamn space alien.
Right,
as you do in that time period.
Yeah, anything. Anyway, the thing that the Nintendo Switch Online version of Super Mario Land 2 isn't really conveying is the slowdown. At least not here.
Yeah, like a lot of emulators do, they fudge it.
Yeah. Because the thing about Super Mario Land 2 is because of the larger sprites and, the overall more detail on screen, it was much more of a relative performance hog compared to Super Mario Land 1.
Yeah, so when there was more than a few things on screen, you're dropping some frames.
It's not just that. It's because Super Mario Land 2 is trying to more closely emulate Mario's Super Mario Brothers 3/Super Mario World physics here on a Game Boy processor. So that's also proving to be more taxing to the system.
Again, part of the reason why they didn't do a whole lot of action games early on is that the Game Boy's processor was on the slow side.
Right, but this leads to the next Land game, Super Mario Land 3 Wario Land. where the same team says, fuck it, let us put this new rival character that we created in Wario and make him the protagonist. And consequently, changing up the gameplay entirely. Because Wario handles much differently to Wario. Wario handles much differently to Mario here. Wario is a goddamn tank or a bulldozer. He's a lot slower than Mario, but he's a lot more bulky. His signature attack is the shoulder charge. And it's not that Wario is super slow or anything. It's just he is noticeably slower than Mario here. But he is also
Mario is pretty fast and very jumpy. Wario is less.
Yeah. And Wario's games are much more exploration-based than Mario here. Mind you, or at least Super Mario Land 2 here is a bit more exploratory than Land 1 was. You even have a lot of hidden stages. Anyway, my ultimate point here is that the three land games are kind of a really good demonstrator of the overall strengths and weaknesses, and as well as the development periods of the Game Boy. And you can even throw in Wario Land 2 for the tail end. What Nintendo was able to accomplish in 1998. Because Wario Land 2 was a Game Boy game. It got a Game Boy Color re-release, as in, there's a version that was made compatible with that system. But,
like Link's Awakening DX?
Yes.
Yes. Though less compatible, like, there wasn't
any... They didn't add a photography mouse.
Or a special dungeon that had color in it. Mm-hmm. It was more akin to like a Super Game Boy palette inclusion. More sophisticated than that, but less than we have specific things that were built for the Game Boy Color.
Mm-hmm.
But Wario Land 2 continued the exploration direction even further. Also including one of the most unique twists you can find in platformers. And that is, what if we made our character immortal, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Not completely free of consequence. In fact, that is worked into the gameplay. Because, the gimmick with Wario Land 2 and consequently Wario Land 3 is,
instead of dying when you get hit by enemies, they change you into something else that either makes it hard to do the thing you're trying to do, or in some cases, is necessary to do the thing you were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or you lose coins.
Yeah.
Like with the basic Goomba enemy, I forget what they call spear guys. You touch their spear, you won't change. You'll just lose some coins, which to Wario is a fate worse than death.
Yeah,
literally in those games.
Insert greed is good commercial.
Yeah. Speaking of Wario, it was also the subject of one of the weirdest first-party conversions ever. I might be the only one who played Wario Blast back in the day.
You might be.
That's the one that was a Bomberman game, and they localized it as a Bomberman and Wario game or something like that?
Exactly. I don't know the logic behind this. I'm
not going to pretend that Wario wouldn't enjoy explosives.
That was actually the ad campaign. That was literally the commercial they played on TV. It was Wario kissing a bomb. A big old black cartoon bomb. and professing his love for the explosive device before it proceeds to explode.
Yeah, I wonder what year that came out in.
Like 94? 93?
Yeah. For those of us who were around in the early 2000s, there's definitely a year where that stopped being okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I'm going to have to look it up when Wario Blast came out. But like I said, it's weird in terms of its conceptuality, because it's one of the most random crossover events in video games. And I'm just like, it plays fine. It plays like a Bomberman game.
Because it is one.
Yes. It's just, they replace the enemy sprites with Wario.
And I think you can play as Wario, too, in one of the modes, at least.
Yeah, I'm like, I think it has a multiplayer mode. And yeah, apparently it came out in November of 1994 here in North America. August 10th, 1994, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those. That would not fly. The ad campaign would not have flown today.
Are you looking at the actual ad?
Just from your description of it, I'm a little busy playing Mario at the moment.
Right. I was about to say, like, but my point is, it wasn't out of place at that time because like, I remember it playing during a airing of Animaniacs, like, which was no stranger to the exact same kind of cartoon violence.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, and there is so much software on the Game Boy, and while in more early days you had, trying to push the Game Boy as a sort of portable NES, by the end of things, well, we were getting, hey, what if we tried to do Super Nintendo games on this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because anyone else remember the goddamn Donkey Kong Land series?
Yes.
God damn
rendered rendered graphics do not work well in 4 colors.
Yeah.
No, or that goddamn screen.
I mean, it was technically very interesting, but
in
actual play, it was a monster.
It was terrible to play on black and white Game Boys.
Yeah,
on a color thing, it was just kind of bad, because at least by the variation in color, you could identify that Donkey Kong was the brown pixels and the enemies were the green pixels or the red pixels or whatever.
Also, the smear didn't make your eyes want to bleed.
Right. But yeah, on an actual black and white Game Boy, that game was not good.
Yeah. I'm like, and it still wasn't the arguable worst use of the Game Boy processor. I think that award goes to the various attempts at fighting games on the Game Boy.
There were fighting games? I did not remember any of these.
I had one of them. I had the Game Boy version of Mortal Kombat.
Oh,
I do not wish...
sweet God in hell.
Here's the thing. The Mortal Kombat series on handhelds, pretty regularly the worst goddamn things imaginable.
I hear if you play Mortal Kombat on an original Game Boy, you don't need to enter the blood code.
I'm like, no, you don't, because there is no blood code.
Well, the joke is that the way they centered it was just making it all gray, and on Game Boy it's all one color regardless.
Well, here's the thing that really makes the Mortal Kombat conversion so full. They tried to have an approximation of the Mortal Kombat sprites on the Game Boy.
For some of these things, you need to you could make it work possibly if you actually put some effort in redesigning things properly with sprites, like they did later on with the Pocket Fighter or Card Fighter or whatever, the Street Fighter game where everybody's super deformed.
Oh no, they actually did that with Street Fighter on the Game Boy. There's a version of Street Fighter 2 on the Game Boy that plays pretty decently.
Yeah.
Because they reformulated it for the Game Boy. The sprites are, more in line with what you should have on the Game Boy versus these big-ass Mortal Kombat sprites that chug at, single-digit frames.
Yes, you can save a lot of effort by just opening the sprites in Microsoft Paint, fucking reducing the size to 60% or whatever, and saving it as a 2-bit bitmap. But at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of performance and functionality?
Yeah, you can't see shit when you when you automatically when you just use presets to knock something down to 4 colors. That's bad.
Yes. Like I said, it's truly terrible stuff. And I would.
The thing is that speaking as a developer that actually was developing games in the era you guys were talking about, I can add that at the time, developers working on this game right here, even this is kind of bleeding edge. This is bleeding edge at that time. So you had super smart people figuring out how to, get everything into memory needed to be into memory to have everything look consistent and to have all of the gameplay mechanics all connected properly with logic, and it's all just invented. As you say, they were experimenting with starting with Super Mario Brothers on NES. That's definitely started everything. It started a whole experimentation wave with trying to get used on every platform they could through the 90s, right?
Right.
Yeah, and experimenting like crazy and pushing whatever they could within the limitations of the technology, which was very, very, very early shit, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So early. Yeah.
This game actually, compared to the first one, is actually a really good case study in that almost everything in this game is actually done in 3 colors rather than 4 in order to make the distinctions. You'll have the background will be 1 color with 1 shade off on it. Mario is high contrast, so there will always be light parts and dark parts, whatever he's up against.
Yeah. And what I'm saying with the likes of Mortal Kombat and Donkey Kong Land is they never stopped experimenting with the Game Boy hardware. Even
push it as far as they can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, once again, I have posted videos of the Mortal Kombat game and Donkey Kong Land in the Discord, so you can actually see the sprites that they were working with on Game Boy hardware.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that's my cue. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Possibly.
And in Mortal Kombat, how the hell are you supposed to be able to tell if you're fighting versus Sub-Zero or Scorpion?
1 pixel difference. Some pixels green as opposed to blue.
Yeah.
If it's in black and white, then they're.
Then it's just shades. So you can do shades of black and white, but it depends how many shades can you get away with, right?
I don't think they were that concerned.
You can do a fair amount of monochrome. You can. Yeah. Yeah. The movie Schindler's List is all black and white, right? I mean, because you're
but that's analog black and white.
I know, it's true. Fair enough. Point taken. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Like I said, there are more examples of this phenomenon, whether it be, getting Super NES level sprites on it or NES level sprites on the Game Boy. Other examples are a lot of conversions from Capcom. Their Disney games are really close to the NES versions, which is actually to their detriment because the performance issues propped up again. This is you can also see this in their Mega Man stuff on the Game Boy.
I reflect on this, the whole sprite thing, right? The sprites it's all about memory, man. It's everything. It's all about what can you fit in the memory. That's it, right? So they have to. There's always this conflict. That's where the whole conflict between artists and programmers kind of started from when it comes to the video game industry, because you had always had artists that were like, I want to look like this, and the programmers like, yeah, good luck with that, right? Like impossible. But then there'd be some kind of compromise. They'd work together for whatever period of time, and they'd figure out a compromise. The artist is like, I guess it's not horrible. And the programmer is like, I guess I can barely fit that in here, in a memory, right? And then, okay, ship it, right? We did the best we could with both sides fighting each other. That's where you get the really good games, right? Where you have two opposing developers that have totally different skill sets, but they're both very passionate, and they're both willing to work together to create the best thing they can, right? That's what it was all about those days, right? It was about how closely can you collaborate with really, really smart people that are every bit as smart as you, if not more smart, like way smarter, right? How can you collaborate well with them and then learn and grow and make something cool, right? It was hard. It was so hard. And also corporate crap. These companies you're talking about, Nintendo, well, they had their way of working. They had workers have their way of working, and corporations. Each corporation has a different way of handling their dev teams, right? In terms of quality of life and all kinds of stuff. And developers that have a bad quality of life are going to make crappy games. Right? It's just yeah.
Yeah, like I brought this up on Sunday because the Game Boy era is. Do you see what I'm talking about here?
I mean, case in point, I believe bottom left and bottom center are Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Can you tell who is who?
No. I'm like I said, this is literally one of the worst games I've ever played. Nothing about this worked. And this was not the only Mortal Kombat game they brought to the Game Boy or Game Boy family. Though
it's
Mortal Kombat Advance had it.
It's impressive. It's here.
Wow. Yeah.
But where do we stop aside the advancement?
Yeah, it's like we're like. Just look at this.
In the very beginning, this is And now you have Steam Deck, and you have the latest Mortal Kombat, basically, right? You put them side by side and go from here to here.
The Nintendo Switch on my desk.
Yeah, there you go. 100%.
I can play.
That's how I played it too. That's how I played it too. Yeah. On the Switch.
Okay, the Nintendo Switch has had its own issues with Mortal Kombat games of recent vintage.
Yeah, but it 6th generation ports work flawlessly.
Right. It's more getting Mortal Kombat 11 and Mortal Kombat 1 on the Switch.
Yeah, 11's on there. It's pretty good. I played 11 on the Switch. It's actually not bad. I played a lot with my family. I fought with my daughters. It's amazing how fighting games really do bring out aggression. So they didn't last too long. But we did.
That's a topic for another time, Fred.
I must admit, I must admit, we did have a really good time with the story. As much it was so weird, it was so different compared to what I understand as interactive storytelling. I kind of enjoyed it because of that. Because it was so completely all left field, so unrelated, right? They just all this footage just shot and stuff. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Like I said, this is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of pushing the Game Boy beyond its limits. Like this is what I get what you were trying to do. Here with Mortal Kombat, you wanted to have a reasonable approximation of the actual arcade game on the Game Boy, but no. And here again with Donkey Kong Land, which is at least a better designed game than Mortal Kombat for the Game Boy.
Yeah, you can definitely tell they're emulating this. Yeah, this is on an emulator.
But that's not the point.
I know.
An emulator, and it's still unplayable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, look at this. Like, look, they tried to get the first level of Donkey Kong Country on the Game Boy, and I guess you sort of did it.
Yeah,
but it's also
it's there, but you can't distinguish it very well.
I can barely see some of these bananas.
Yeah, the number one thing to do would have been to simplify background graphics, and even Donkey Kong Land 2 did a bit better on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's all very fuzzy to me, extremely fuzzy, right? It's also sort of a mash. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'm glad I brought the videos up just so people can see what.
Yeah.
the eye-searing torture we had to go through in the 90s as a Game Boy player.
Yeah, I am also going to need to remember
also,
to put
fun fact,
proper
according to the
attribution in
Spriters
there.
resource, Mortal Kombat on the Game Boy does just use the same sprites for Scorpion and Sub-Zero, but they have different attack effects.
I'm shocked.
I mean, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
Sonic 2, Tails was literally just Sonic. As far as coding-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the secret best Game Boy game, it had things down. And that is Donkey Kong 94, or just Donkey Kong for the Game Boy.
Ah, yes. I was waiting for you to bring this up.
Yeah. Well, I had to bring up its evil opposite in Donkey Kong Land here.
That is valid.
Dear God. Yeah, just get that off the screen.
Yes, it's changed to the better one.
Yes. Because, now here we have definition.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can tell that is a Donkey Kong.
Not only that, but look at it. It's got shading on Donkey Kong here.
They put that 4-color kind of monochrome to work.
Yeah. Now, it is worth noting that Donkey Kong 94 was also kind of the centerpiece for the Super Game Boy when it launched.
Mm-hmm.
So it had special functionality programmed in to take advantage of what the Super Game Boy could do. Like, it had better color functionality than, say, Tetris or Super Mario Land, or something that was programmed in 1989.
Right.
But anyway, you have Mario here, who's not too big, not too small. He's easily identified as Mario. So we're working better than what we had with Super Mario Land 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And you also see his movement speed, because, Donkey Kong isn't a high-action platformer, but instead a puzzle platformer. I mean, it initially starts with the original Donkey Kong levels from the arcade, but after you beat those, it goes into much more elaborate levels. And this was a common phenomenon on the Game Boy. You had a lot of these reformulated arcade classics. I mean, Donkey Kong is the headliner, but you also had the likes of Lock and Chase, Q*bert, Bubble Bobble had even down to stuff that wasn't necessarily an arcade game, like Hyper Load Runner or Karateka Master.
Oh God.
Yeah, but see how smooth this is moving.
Yeah. Honestly, would look like an HD remaster of the OG arcade game.
Yeah, I'm like, this is everything good about Game Boy design in one package.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
at least as far as action goes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because arguably the strongest genre on the Game Boy was the puzzle genre, which we haven't even touched upon yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad we don't. Yeah, I mean, Tetris is the obvious one. Because that was the pack in 40 some odd million sold, yada yada, launched the Game Boy into the stratosphere.
But yeah, Tetris, Sokoban the original.
Mm-hmm. Heian, Alien, related, but also a lot more actiony. But you do get a lot of action puzzlers on the game. I mean, if you want to know how ingrained puzzle gaming was on the Game Boy, Konami released a game called Quarth on the Game Boy. It was originally an arcade game, saw some releases on other systems, but one of the only versions that came to the West was on the Game Boy. And that is a combination of a vertical shmup and Tetris. if we could get some footage of Quarth here. Once again, it's a game that you really have to see to understand.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you get that all the time with Game Boy games. Like there was Q-Billions, very early Game Boy game. A game I mentioned on Sunday, Quirk, which was basically, what if Sokoban, but we replaced the Boxman with a tomato, and made the boxes longer. Like I said, there's no dearth of interesting software on the Game Boy. Because mind you, there is a lot of shovelware and just a lot of stuff that is poorly documented.
All right, I think I found Quarth.
It's not hard to find.
Yeah.
That'd be it. There's the Ultra Games logo. Konami.
Yep. Oh, hold on. All right, fix it.
But yeah, like I said, once again, this is another conversion from the arcade, but it's a conversion that makes sense for the platform. Because, once again, it's a shmup meeting Tetris.
Huh.
And I bet you didn't even know this game existed.
I did not.
No. Like, I'll be honest.
Really cool. Looks really cool. Huh.
Yeah. Like, the Game Boy is populated with all sorts of games like this. Just, really interesting stuff that had very little penetration because of how disposable Game Boy games are.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the way, not just third parties, but, how Nintendo treated the system.
Still
a lot
kind
of the time.
It, let's be real.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that was really striking to me in Game Boy Works is when they keep talking about when they're getting to Game Boy Works is what did Nintendo Power say about it? Pretty much no.
Yeah, like
they didn't really.
Yeah, it's like the Game Boy, the eternal sidekick, to the NES or the Super Nintendo, depending on what was active at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I never owned a Game Boy, so that's kind of why I'm quiet a lot of this time. I can't relate. I never owned one ever. I was making games in the '90s, and the only games I was playing were on the PC. I was a hardcore PC gamer.
Mm-hmm. Well, we actually had some devs on the show who cut their teeth on the Game Boy development.
Oh, I'm sure.
Not just cut their teeth, but are making modern Game Boy games.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Game Boy development scene is fairly active.
It's definitely somewhere if you want to brush up on your programming skills, definitely look into developing for the Game Boy.
Yeah, it's also, there is this tool set called GB Studio, which apparently makes Game Boy development really easy, comparatively speaking.
I was about to say, you're going to put some qualifiers in there, buddy, or do I need to?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, comparatively speaking, game development never gets easy.
God, ain't that the truth?
Game development got a billion times easier compared to what it used to be.
Oh yeah, it's
I'm not even being hyperbolic either. I'm not being hyperbolic.
And practicing programming the Game Boy would probably give you a fabulous grounding in code optimization, which is something that a lot of developers working these days clearly know no fucking thing about.
100%.
I need a 80 gigabyte patch for my freaking, insert modern game here, and I'm like, what the hell happened to the 100 megabyte ones from back in my youth?
And it doesn't even look better.
Right.
Yeah. And now it's time for my most, perhaps, controversial take on the Game Boy.
Oh, God, here we go.
And that is, I think the Game Boy has, pound for pound, a better library than the Game Boy Advance.
Oof.
The Game Boy Advance
I'm like,
did have
once again-
a lot of shovelware because it hit.
Yeah.
First off, it hit after the last period of Game Boy, which we kind of skipped over somewhat, which is the post-Pokemon era, when there's a lot of multiplayer-focused RPGs, we'll say, where they want you to be doing that, and then a lot of those were not up to Game Freak standards, which is not as much of a compliment as it might sound like. Or rather, I should say it's a harsher indictment than it might sound like.
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely the shovelware issue, because, as I've mentioned a few times now, the Game Boy Advance hit a peak of the licensed game development.
And when
the
Game Boy,
make no mistake,
especially
the Game
brand,
Boy
was tied with your little brother's console.
Yeah. It's like, name a Nicktoon, Disney program, anything, and it probably has a Game Boy Advance game.
Especially from the early 2000s.
And the second half I was going to get to is it was because the system had gotten popular because of the Pokemon stuff, and the successor system was then had a lot
there's
of grandfathering.
There's another facet that you're missing, and it's the tipping point for me, and that is the ports. Well,
no, that's what I was getting to, is that people thought the system was powerful enough to run shit that it really wasn't.
Well, no, it was powerful enough to run Super Nintendo games.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it was powerful enough to run it, and therefore it was good to release stuff on there. Because yes, you can put a Super Nintendo game on it.
Yeah, believe me, I'm well aware that the Game Boy Advance continued the tradition of pushing shit on a Game Boy system that you really shouldn't. But we'll get into 3D on the Game Boy Advance when we talk about the Game Boy Advance for its next anniversary.
Oh God.
I'm like, because that is its own fascinating subject that
I'm
really
gonna need to find a way to record Need for Speed from mine, aren't I?
Need for Speed Porsche Unleashed, or Top Gear Rally, or any of the number of the 3D racing games on the Game Boy Advance. There are a lot of
I think I have Undercover. Or not Undercover, Underground.
And yeah, watching this video, the game mechanics for Core, they're kind of fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah,
I like them a lot. I would say that's really, really good. Yeah. Very inventive.
Meanwhile, the game dev in the room is like, all right, how can I incorporate this into my next project?
Well, it's true. Whenever I see some new idea, it definitely goes into the toolbox of my brain. There's no question.
I mean, you could easily make a hacking me game out of this.
Yeah.
I have to say, guys, it's been really, really cool being on your show. I'm really fascinated with all your insights and stuff. Actually, and it's been a pleasure. Seriously, it's been fun. But I have to bow out pretty soon here, though, because
that's fine.
I got to finish.
Yeah, that's fine. In fact, we should probably be wrapping up here.
Yeah, and we are glad you stayed for the topic of discussion. Guests don't always do that, but we love it when they have something to add.
I was fascinated because you guys have you always obviously played these games and have this device, and so it was really cool to hear your perspective, and also really cool to see that deep dive into history at that part of the game development that I wasn't a part of back then, right? Mm-hmm. You guys were, so it was like an insight. So it really cool. I learned a lot. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was really a pleasure. Thank you.
And like I said, there is just so much about the system that we haven't talked about, whether it be individual games, deeper into
about shows till dawn. This could easily be a show till dawn if we let Adam keep
going. Totally in that vibe.
This is what happens when you have over 1,000 games on your system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, so this will bring us to a conclusion of this episode of Fragments of Silicon. So that brings us to the week ahead. Obviously, given how long we've run this week, we have no MSP this week, no MSP next week.
Mac would be screaming at us right now.
Oh, God, yes. I'm like, on the show, very embarrassing.
Yes.
Anyway.
Not like that's haven't happened before.
Yeah. Anyway, on Friday, May 3rd, we will be welcoming Jeff C. of Little Crown Games. He is the developer of Plungeroo. Plungeroo is a colorful puzzle game about tinkering with mini pinball cabinets. No quick reflexes or quarters required. Maneuver your pinball through pop bumpers, flippers, and more until you become a pinball wizard. Like, so look for that on Friday. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Ario, Montgomery Fox and the Case of the Diamond Necklace, Shadow Madness, and impressions for Hexter. So until next time, I shall wish you good games.